The dust cloud rising from the road announced trouble long before Faith Bradford could make out the black carriage coming toward her family's farm, and she knew with a sinking certainty that banker Silas Rutherford had come to deliver bad news on this scorching July afternoon in 1876. She wiped the sweat from her brow and straightened her spine, refusing to let fear show on her face as she stood in the yard of the small ranch outside Dallas, Texas, that had been in her family for 20 years. Her father had died 6 months ago, leaving her mother bedridden with grief and consumption, and Faith had been trying desperately to keep the farm running with just her younger brother Timothy, who was only 15 and too young to carry the weight of a man's work. The mortgage payments had fallen behind, and she had been to the bank twice begging for more time, but Rutherford was a hard man who cared only for profit and had made it clear he wanted their land for himself. The carriage pulled up in front of the house, and Rutherford stepped out, his expensive suit looking absurdly out of place against the backdrop of weathered wood and dusty earth. He was a portly man in his 50s with cold gray eyes and a thin mouth that rarely smiled except when discussing money. Behind him came his assistant, a nervous young man clutching a leather case full of papers. "Miss Bradford," Rutherford said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I believe you know why I am here." Faith crossed her arms over her chest, aware that her work dress was faded and patched, that her hands were calloused, and her face sun-bronzed from working outdoors. She was 22 years old and had long ago given up any dreams of being a proper lady. "You said I had until the end of the month." "That was before I learned about the additional debts your father incurred," Rutherford said smoothly, pulling a paper from his assistant's case. "It seems he borrowed against future crop yields 2 years ago. With the drought affecting this season's harvest, that debt has come due immediately. The total amount owed is now $800. The number hit Faith like a physical blow. She had been struggling to come up with the $200 for the regular mortgage payment. 800 might as well have been 8,000. "That cannot be right. My father would have told me." "Your father was a desperate man trying to save a failing farm," Rutherford said coldly. "He made poor decisions. Now I am here to collect, or I will be forced to foreclose. You have until Friday. 3 days, Miss Bradford." "Please," Faith said, hating the tremor in her voice. "My mother is ill. We have nowhere else to go. Just give me until after the harvest. I will pay every cent." Rutherford's expression did not change. "I have given you more than enough time. Friday, Miss Bradford, or I will have the sheriff remove you from the property." He climbed back into his carriage without another word, leaving Faith standing in the yard with her world crumbling around her. She waited until the dust from his departure settled before she let herself sink down onto the porch steps, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. $800. There was no possible way to raise that kind of money in 3 days. She could sell everything they owned and still fall short. The cattle were already sold off to pay for her father's funeral and her mother's medicine. The farm equipment was old and barely functional. They had nothing left of value except the land itself, and that was exactly what Rutherford wanted. Timothy came running from the barn, his young face flushed with exertion. "What did he want? I saw his carriage." Faith forced herself to stand, smoothing down her skirt. "Nothing we cannot handle? Did you finish mending the fence in the south pasture?" "Almost." Timothy looked at her with eyes too old for his age. "Faith, tell me the truth. Are we going to lose the farm?" She wanted to lie, to protect him the way she always had, but he deserved to know. "I do not know, but I promise you I will fight with everything I have to keep our home." That night, after Timothy had gone to bed and Faith had checked on her mother, who barely recognized her through the fever fog, she sat at the kitchen table and went through her father's papers again, searching for any solution she might have missed. The lantern flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls as she calculated and recalculated the impossible numbers. She thought about going to the other farmers in the area, but she knew they were all struggling with the same drought and falling crop prices. She thought about appealing to the church, but their charity fund was already stretched thin, helping families even worse off than hers. She was still sitting there when dawn broke, no closer to an answer, her eyes burning with unshed tears and exhaustion. She stood and splashed cold water on her face from the basin, then went outside to start the morning chores. The chickens needed feeding, the cow needed milking, and the vegetable garden needed watering. Life continued whether you had the strength for it or not. She was hauling water from the well when she heard the sound of a horse approaching. For a moment her heart seized, thinking Rutherford had returned early, but when she looked up she saw a lone rider coming down the road. He sat tall in the saddle, and even from a distance she could tell he was a big man. As he drew closer, she found herself staring despite her exhaustion and worry. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen in Dallas. He looked like he had ridden straight out of the mountains, all raw power and untamed strength. His hair was dark brown and fell past his shoulders, tied back loosely with a strip of leather. His jaw was strong and shadowed with several days' growth of beard, but it was his build that truly caught her attention. His shoulders were impossibly broad, straining against the rough fabric of his shirt, and his arms were thick with muscle. He looked like a man who could break a horse with his bare hands or carry a full-grown steer on his back. Everything about him spoke of hard living and harder work, from his weather-beaten clothing to the rifle strapped to his saddle. He stopped his horse near the well and touched the brim of his hat, his eyes a striking blue-gray that seemed to take in everything about her in one glance. "Morning, madam. I'm looking for work. Heard in town there might be farms needing hands." Faith set down her water bucket, very aware of how she must look after her sleepless night. "You heard wrong. Most farms around here are letting workers go, not hiring them." He swung down from his horse with an easy grace that seemed at odds with his size, and she realized he was even bigger than she had thought. He had to be at least 6.5 feet tall, built like an oak tree, with hands that looked like they could span her waist. "Name is Barrett Langley. I work hard, do not drink, and do not cause trouble. I would take room and board instead of wages if that helps." "Mr. Langley, I appreciate the offer, but I cannot afford to feed another mouth right now. I'm sorry." He studied her face for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling that he was seeing far more than she wanted to reveal. "You look like you have not slept, and that fence line over there is sagging bad enough to lose livestock. When did you last have help on this place?" "My father died 6 months ago," Faith said, not sure why she was telling this stranger her business. "It has just been me and my younger brother since then." Barrett's expression softened slightly. "I am sorry for your loss. All the more reason you could use an extra pair of hands." "All the more reason I cannot pay you," Faith said firmly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." She picked up her water bucket and started toward the house, but his voice stopped her. "That banker who was here yesterday, Rutherford. I saw his carriage leaving town and followed it out of curiosity." "He's not a good man." Faith turned back slowly. "You know him?" "Know of him. I've been working my way through Texas the past few months, and his name comes up in too many towns. He has a habit of collecting farms from folks who cannot pay." Barrett's jaw tightened. "Usually widows and families in hard times." "Then you know there is nothing I can do about it." Faith felt her control slipping, all the fear and exhaustion of the past months welling up inside her. "He says we owe $800 by Friday, or he forecloses. I have maybe $50 to my name. So unless you are secretly wealthy and feeling extremely charitable, I do not see how anything you can do will help." She did not mean to sound so harsh, but the words came out bitter and sharp. To her surprise, Barrett did not look offended. Instead, he looked thoughtful. $800, that's a lot of money." "Yes, Mr. Langley, it is, which is why I am about to lose everything my family built." She felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. "Now please, I need to get back to work." This time when she walked away, he did not stop her. She heard him mount his horse and ride off, and she told herself it was better this way. She did not need strangers witnessing her family's humiliation. She threw herself into her work with renewed desperation, as if by fixing fence posts and weeding the garden, she could somehow fix the impossible situation she was in. Timothy helped without complaint, though she could see the worry in his eyes. By the time the sun set on Tuesday evening, she was so exhausted she could barely drag herself inside to heat up leftover beans for supper. Wednesday morning brought another scorching day and no new solutions. Faith was in the barn checking on their remaining horse when she heard someone approach. She turned to find Barrett Langley standing in the doorway, his large frame blocking most of the light. "I thought I told you I could not hire you," she said, trying to sound firm despite the way her heart had jumped at the sight of him. "I have been thinking about your situation," he said without preamble. "I have the money you need." Faith felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "What?" $800. I have it. He said it casually, as if discussing the weather rather than a fortune. I will pay off your mortgage. For a moment she could only stare at him. Then anger flared hot in her chest. I do not know what kind of woman you think I am, Mr. Langley, but I am not that desperate. I will not trade my virtue for money. His eyes widened slightly, and she thought she saw color rise in his cheeks beneath his tan. That is not what I'm suggesting. At all. He held up his hands as if in surrender. I'm offering to help. No strings attached. No one has that kind of money to just give away, Faith said suspiciously. What do you really want? Barrett was quiet for a moment, then moved further into the barn. Even in the dim light, she could see the serious set of his jaw. I have spent the past 5 years in the mountains, trapping and hunting. I am good at what I do, and I do not spend much. I've saved up a fair amount, and I have seen too many good people lose everything to men like Rutherford who care more about profit than human decency. So you go around the countryside rescuing strangers? Faith heard the skepticism in her own voice. Why would you do that? Maybe because I know what it is like to lose everything, he said quietly. Maybe because I am tired of seeing bullies win. Does it matter? Yes. It matters! Faith's voice rose despite herself. I do not know you. You show up out of nowhere, offering exactly what I need at exactly the right time. That does not happen in real life. There has to be a catch. The catch is that you will have to trust me. Barrett met her eyes steadily. I know that is asking a lot, but I am offering you a way to keep your home and take care of your family. All I ask in return is that you let me work here for room and board until I decide to move on. I need a place to rest for a while, and you need help keeping this farm running. It seems like a fair trade to me. Faith wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her this was too good to be true, that accepting help from a stranger would only lead to trouble. But when she thought about her mother upstairs, about Timothy trying so hard to be the man of the house at 15, about losing the only home they had ever known, she found herself wavering. I would pay you back, she said finally. Every cent. It would take time, but I would do it. We can discuss that later. Right now, the important thing is making sure Rutherford does not take your farm. Barrett's expression was earnest. Let me help you, Faith. Hearing her name in his deep voice did something strange to her pulse. She realized she had never actually introduced herself. How do you know my name? Asked in town yesterday. Wanted to know more about the situation before I made my offer. He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. Folks speak well of your family. Said your father was a good man who had some bad luck. Faith felt tears prick her eyes again and blinked them away angrily. She was so tired of crying, of being afraid, of feeling helpless. Why are you really doing this? Barrett was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Because when I rode up and saw you standing there in your yard, looking like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, something in me said I was meant to be here. I cannot explain it better than that. Maybe I am crazy, but I have learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts are telling me to help you. Faith looked at him, this strange mountain man with his long hair and powerful build and inexplicable offer of salvation. Everything logical told her to send him away, but she was out of options and out of time, and somewhere beneath her fear and suspicion, she found herself wanting to trust him. If I agree, she said slowly, you work for your keep, you sleep in the barn, you do not come in the house unless invited, and you do not expect anything from me beyond honest meals and a place to rest. Are we clear? Crystal clear, madam. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the start of a smile. I will go into town today and settle your debt with Rutherford. Is there a lawyer in Dallas you trust? James Morrison. His office is above the general store. I will make sure everything is legal and properly documented. You have my word. Barrett touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave, then paused. Faith, you made the right choice. I know you do not believe that yet, but you will. After he left, Faith stood in the barn for a long time, her mind spinning. She felt like she had just stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to find out if she would fly or fall. But for the first time in days, the crushing weight of despair had lifted slightly. She had hope, however, fragile and uncertain. She went to find Timothy and broke the news to him. Her brother's face cycled through disbelief, joy, and suspicion in quick succession. He's just going to give us $800? What does he want in return? To work here for room and board, that is all he asked for. Timothy frowned. That does not make sense. Nobody does that. I know, Faith sighed. But we are out of options, Tim. And something tells me we can trust him. I cannot explain it any better than that. Her brother studied her face, then nodded slowly. If you trust him, then I do too. Besides, we could use the help. I have been trying to fix the irrigation system for weeks and I cannot figure it out. He looks like the kind of man who can fix just about anything, Faith said, then felt her cheeks warm at the admission. She'd been trying very hard not to think about Barrett Langley's broad shoulders and strong arms, or the way his eyes seemed to see straight into her soul. Barrett returned late that afternoon, riding tall in his saddle, his face unreadable. Faith's heart hammered as she watched him dismount and pull papers from his saddlebag. She met him in the yard, Timothy hovering anxiously nearby. It is done, Barrett said, handing her a sheaf of documents. Your mortgage is paid in full. The farm is legally yours, free and clear. I had Morrison draw up papers putting the title in your name alone, so there can be no question about ownership. Faith took the papers with shaking hands. She could barely read the words through the blur of tears, but she saw her name, Faith Bradford, listed as the sole owner of the property. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. Barrett's voice was gentle. Just promise me you will not let Rutherford bully you again. If he comes around causing trouble, you send for me. How did he react when you paid him? Timothy asked. Barrett's expression darkened. He was not happy. Tried to claim there were additional fees and interest, but Morrison was there and put a stop to that. Rutherford knows the debt is settled, even if he does not like it. He will try to find another way to take the farm, Faith said quietly. Men like him do not give up easily. Then it is good you have help now. Barrett glanced toward the barn. If you do not mind, I would like to get settled before dark, and tomorrow I can start on those repairs your brother mentioned. Faith found her voice finally. Mr. Langley, Barrett, thank you. I do not have words for what you have done for us. You saved our home. You saved my family. He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. I just did what needed doing. Now, about those sleeping arrangements? She showed him to the barn, which suddenly seemed inadequate for housing someone who had just given them everything. She had Timothy help her carry out one of the spare mattresses from the house and some extra blankets, despite Barrett's protests that he had slept on far worse. She brought him towels and soap and a basin for washing up, acutely aware of his eyes following her movements. The pump is just outside, she said, feeling awkward. Supper is at 6. I will ring the bell. I appreciate it. Barrett set his pack down in the corner she had cleared for him. Faith, I hope you know I meant what I said. I do not expect anything from you beyond what we agreed on. I want you to feel safe with me here. I do, she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I cannot explain why, but I do. That night at supper, she brought out an extra plate and insisted Barrett join them at the table. It felt strange having a man in the house again, especially one who seemed to fill up the entire room with his presence. But he was polite and careful, complimenting her cooking even though it was just simple stew and bread, and he made Timothy laugh with stories about life in the mountains. Faith watched him as he talked, noting the way his hands moved expressively despite their size, the way his whole face changed when he smiled. There was a gentleness to him that seemed at odds with his rough exterior, a kindness in his eyes that made her chest ache in a way she did not quite understand. After supper, he helped clear the dishes despite her protests, then excused himself to let them have their evening. Faith watched through the window as he walked back to the barn, his figure silhouetted against the sunset, and felt something shift inside her that had nothing to do with gratitude. The next morning, Faith woke early as always and was surprised to find Barrett already up and working on the fence line he had mentioned days ago. She watched from the kitchen window as he pulled old posts from the ground with his bare hands, his muscles flexing beneath his shirt. She told herself she was just checking to make sure he was settling in, but she could not seem to look away. When she brought him water mid-morning, she found him stripped down to just his undershirt, sweat gleaming on his arms and throat. He straightened when he saw her approaching, and she tried very hard to keep her eyes on his face. You did not have to bring that all the way out here, he said, accepting the jar gratefully, but I appreciate it. It is hot work. I did not want you getting sick. She glanced at the fence line, impressed by how much he had already accomplished. You work fast. Been doing physical labor most of my life. Your brother has been helping. He's a good kid. Smart, too. He is. Faith felt a surge of affection for Timothy. He's been trying so hard to fill my father's shoes. It has been hard on him. Hard on you, too, I imagine. Barrett's eyes were sympathetic. You have been carrying a heavy load. Someone had to. She looked away, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. Anyway, I should get back to the house. I need to check on my mother. How's she doing? Faith hesitated. She had not talked to anyone about her mother's decline, keeping that pain private. But something about Barrett made her want to share it. Not well. The doctor says her lungs are failing. Between the grief and the consumption, she just does not have the strength to fight anymore. I am sorry. Barrett's voice was rough with genuine sympathy. That's a hard thing to watch. Yes? Faith blinked back tears. Some days she does not even recognize me. Other days she is lucid and asks about my father, and I have to tell her all over again that he is gone. I do not know which is worse. Barrett reached out as if to touch her arm, then seemed to think better of it and let his hand drop. If there is anything I can do to help, you just say the word. You have already done more than I could ever repay. She managed a weak smile. But thank you. Over the following days, Barrett proved himself invaluable. He fixed the irrigation system Timothy had been struggling with, repaired the roof on the chicken coop, and reinforced the barn doors. He worked from dawn until dusk, never complaining, always finding something that needed attention. Timothy followed him around like a puppy, soaking up knowledge and male attention he had been missing since their father died. Faith found herself watching Barrett more than she should, learning his habits and rhythms. She noticed how he always checked on the animals before he tended to his own needs, how he was gentle with the livestock despite his strength. She saw the way he spoke to Timothy, never talking down to him but treating him like an equal, and she caught him sometimes looking toward the house with an expression of such loneliness that it made her heart ache. One evening, about a week after he had arrived, Faith was hanging laundry in the yard when a summer storm rolled in suddenly, the way they often did in Texas. The wind picked up, whipping the clothes and threatening to tear them from the line. She was trying to gather everything before the rain hit when Barrett appeared at her side. "Get inside," he shouted over the rising wind. "I will get these." "I can do it," she yelled back, but he was already pulling down the sheets with quick, efficient movements. Together they managed to gather most of the laundry just as the first fat drops of rain began to fall. They ran for the house, laughing despite the chaos, and tumbled through the door just as the sky opened up completely. Faith stood in the kitchen, breathless and damp, holding an armful of half-dry clothes. Barrett was beside her, his hair plastered to his face, water dripping from his beard. Their eyes met, and suddenly the laughter died. Faith felt the air between them change, become charged with something she did not quite dare name. "You are soaked," she said, her voice coming out softer than intended. "So are you." His eyes dropped to where her dress was clinging to her figure, then quickly away. "I should go." "You cannot go out in this storm. It would be dangerous." Faith set down her bundle of laundry. "Stay, just until it passes." They stood there in the kitchen, the storm raging outside, and Faith felt like they were balanced on the edge of something inevitable. She knew she should send him back to the barn, maintain the careful distance she had insisted on. But she did not want to. She wanted him to stay. She wanted to know more about this mysterious man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known to speak. "Tell me about yourself," she said, moving to the stove to make coffee. "Where are you from? How did you end up in the mountains?" Barrett hesitated, then slowly sank into one of the kitchen chairs. "I grew up in Missouri. Small farm, nothing fancy. I was the youngest of 4 boys." "Was?" Faith asked gently, hearing the past tense. "They all died in the war. My parents, too, in a way. Father never recovered from losing his sons. He died in '69. Mother followed 6 months later." Barrett's voice was flat, emotionless, but Faith could hear the pain beneath it. "I sold the farm and headed west. Did not see much point in staying where everything reminded me of what I had lost." "I am so sorry." Faith poured 2 cups of coffee and brought them to the table, sitting across from him. That must have been unbearable. It was a long time ago. Barrett wrapped his large hands around the cup, seeming to take comfort from its warmth. I found work as a guide in the Rockies, then started trapping. Spent 5 years living alone in a cabin I built with my own hands. It was peaceful, quiet. No one asking me questions or expecting anything from me. Why did you leave? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. Because I realized I was not living. I was just existing. I was hiding from the world because I was afraid of losing anyone else. And then one day I woke up and understood that I was losing my life by trying to protect myself from loss. He looked up at her, his eyes intense. So I came down from the mountain and started drifting, looking for something I could not name, until I rode up to your farm and saw you standing there, and something just clicked into place. Faith's breath caught. What do you mean? I mean that for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Barrett held her gaze. I know that probably sounds strange. We barely know each other. But from the moment I saw you, I felt something. A pull. Like I had been wandering for 5 years just to end up here. Faith's heart was racing. She knew she should laugh it off, make light of his words. But she could not, because she felt it too. This strange, impossible connection that made no logical sense but felt more real than anything she had experienced in years. I felt it too, she admitted quietly. That is why I agreed to let you help. It was not just desperation. There was something about you that made me trust you when I had no reason to. The storm raged outside, rain hammering against the windows, but inside the kitchen, it felt like they were in their own small world. Barrett reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, Faith placed her hand in his. His palm was rough and calloused, his fingers completely engulfing hers, but his touch was incredibly gentle. I do not want to pressure you, he said quietly. You have been through so much, and you need to focus on your family and your farm, but I want you to know that I am not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to leave. And whatever happens between us, if anything happens, it will be because we both want it, not because you feel obligated to me. Faith felt tears sting her eyes. She had been so strong for so long, holding everything together by sheer force of will. But sitting here with Barrett, feeling the strength and steadiness radiating from him, she felt something inside her begin to soften and open. I want to trust this, she whispered. I want to believe that something good can come out of all the hardship. But I am scared, Barrett. I am scared of needing you, of depending on you. What if you leave? What if I let myself care about you and then lose you like I have lost everyone else? I cannot promise I will never die, Barrett said honestly. Life does not come with guarantees. But I can promise that I am not going anywhere by choice. I can promise that whatever time we have, I will be here, solid and steady and true. That is all anyone can promise, Faith. But I swear to you, I mean it with everything I am. She believed him. Looking into his eyes, feeling the warm strength of his hand around hers, she believed him completely. It should have terrified her, this trust she was placing in a man she had known less than 2 weeks. But instead, it felt right. It felt like coming home. The storm passed as Texas storms do, quickly and completely, leaving the world washed clean and new. Barrett stood to go, and Faith walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. She found herself wanting him to with an intensity that surprised her, but he just touched her cheek gently with his fingertips, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache, and then he was gone, striding across the muddy yard to the barn. Faith leaned against the doorframe, watching him go, and felt her life shifting in ways she could not quite name. She was falling for him. Against all logic and reason, despite all her fears and reservations, she was falling hard for the mountain man who had appeared in her life like magic and saved everything she held dear. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hard work and growing feelings. Barrett continued to prove himself indispensable, not just with his physical labor, but with his quiet, steady presence. He was there when Faith needed someone to talk to, when Timothy needed guidance, when something broke and needed fixing. He became part of the fabric of their lives so naturally that Faith could hardly remember what it had been like before he arrived. Her mother continued to decline, having more bad days than good. Barrett never intruded on those private moments of grief, but he was always there afterward, a comforting presence that required nothing from her, but allowed her to simply be. She found herself seeking him out more and more, drawn to his strength and his gentleness in equal measure. One evening in early August, Faith was sitting on the porch after supper, enjoying the slight cooling of the air that came with sunset. Barrett emerged from the barn and crossed the yard to join her, settling onto the steps beside her with a comfortable ease that spoke of how far they had come from those first awkward days. "Timothy told me about the county fair coming up," he said. "Says there is dancing and contests. Sounds like the whole town turns out." "It is the biggest event of the year," Faith confirmed. "My father used to enter his best steer in the livestock competition. We would make a whole day of it." She smiled at the memory, bittersweet now. "I have not been since before he died." "Would you like to go?" Barrett asked. "All of us, I mean. Timothy seems excited about it, and I thought it might be good for you to get away from the farm for a day." Faith considered it. The idea of facing the town, of answering questions about Barrett and dealing with gossip made her anxious. But she also longed for a day of normalcy, of joy and community. "I would like that. But people will talk, about you being here." "Let them talk." Barrett's voice was firm. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. You fought to keep your farm, and you succeeded. If folks want to whisper about it, that says more about them than it does about you." "You are right," Faith smiled at him, "and I think it would be good for Timothy. He has been working so hard. He deserves some fun." The day of the fair dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for the festivities. Faith dressed in her best dress, a blue cotton that brought out her eyes and pinned up her hair carefully. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and was surprised by what she saw. She looked happy. The haunted, exhausted expression she had worn for months was gone, replaced by something lighter and brighter. When she came downstairs, Barrett was waiting in the yard, and she saw his eyes widen slightly at the sight of her. He had cleaned up too, his hair neatly tied back, his beard trimmed, wearing what were clearly his best clothes. He looked handsome and a little uncomfortable, like a wild thing dressed in civilization. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and Faith felt warmth spread through her chest. "You clean up well yourself," she replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. They rode into Dallas in the wagon, Timothy bouncing with excitement beside them. The town square was transformed, decorated with bunting and streamers, crowded with people and lined with booths, selling everything from baked goods to handcrafted items. Music floated through the air, and the smell of roasting meat made Faith's stomach growl. They had barely climbed down from the wagon when the whispers started. Faith saw heads turning, women leaning together to murmur behind their hands. She felt Barrett tense beside her and knew he heard it too. Then Silas Rutherford appeared, his expression cold and calculating. "Miss Bradford," he said, ignoring Barrett entirely, "I see you brought your hired hand to the fair. How democratic of you." "Mr. Langley is not my hired hand," Faith said clearly, making sure her voice carried. "He is a guest on my farm and a friend to my family." Rutherford's eyes narrowed. "I am sure he is very friendly. It is amazing how a woman in distress can be taken in by a smooth-talking stranger with money to spend." Barrett moved forward, his sighs suddenly menacing, but Faith touched his arm gently. "Do not. He is not worth it." "Listen to your woman," Rutherford sneered. "She knows her place even if you do not." "My place is beside my family and friends," Faith said coldly. "And you, Mr. Rutherford, are neither. Now if you will excuse us, we have a fair to enjoy." She walked past him with her head high, Barrett and Timothy flanking her. She could feel the weight of the town's stares, but she refused to let it bother her. She had done nothing wrong. Barrett had saved her farm and asked nothing in return but honest work. If people wanted to make something ugly out of that, it was their problem, not hers. As the day wore on, some of the tension eased. Other farmers who knew the truth about Rutherford's practices made a point of greeting them warmly. The pastor's wife complimented Faith's dress and chatted with her about everyday things. Timothy ran off with friends his own age, leaving Faith and Barrett to wander the fair together. They watched the livestock competitions and the horse races. They sampled sweets from the baking competition and admired the quilts on display. and slowly, as the sun moved across the sky, Faith felt herself relaxing and simply enjoying the day. Barrett was good company, pointing out interesting things, making her laugh with dry observations about the more pompous competitors, staying close enough that she felt protected, but never crowding her. As evening approached, the dancing began. A small band set up in the square, and couples began to move to the music. Faith watched them with longing. She had always loved dancing, but she had not danced since before her father got sick. It felt like another life, another person. "Would you dance with me?" Barrett's voice was low, almost hesitant. "If you do not mind people talking, I mean." Faith looked up at him, this mountain man who had learned to waltz somewhere in his past, and felt her heart swell with affection. "I would love to." He led her onto the makeshift dance floor, and when he took her in his arms, everything else fell away. He was surprisingly graceful for such a big man, moving with the same easy confidence he brought to everything else. Faith let herself relax into the dance, following his lead, acutely aware of his hand at her waist and her hand in his. "I have not danced in years," he admitted as they turned. "I'm probably terrible." "You are wonderful," Faith said honestly. "Where did you learn?" "My mother insisted all her boys know how to dance properly, said we would never find good wives if we could not waltz." His expression turned melancholy. "She would have liked you. She always said I needed someone strong enough to challenge me and soft enough to gentle me." "I am not sure I'm either of those things," Faith said softly. "You are both. You are the strongest woman I have ever met, Faith. You kept your family together and your farm running through circumstances that would have broken most people. But you have this softness too, this capacity for love and hope that you have not let the world take from you." Barrett's eyes were intense on hers. "You are extraordinary." Faith felt tears threaten and blinked them back. "You make me want to believe that." "Then believe it, because it is true." They danced through 2 more songs, lost in their own world, and when the music finally ended, Barrett walked her back to where Timothy was waiting. Her brother took one look at her face and grinned knowingly, but said nothing. On the ride home, Faith felt lighter than she had in months. The fair had been exactly what she needed, a reminder that there was still joy and beauty in the world, even in the midst of hardship. And having Barrett beside her had made it all the sweeter. That night, after Timothy had gone to bed, Faith walked out to the barn. She told herself she just wanted to thank Barrett again for the lovely day, but she knew that was not the whole truth. She wanted to see him. She needed to be near him. She found him sitting on a bale of hay, cleaning his rifle by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. I just wanted to talk." Faith settled onto another hay bale, tucking her skirt around her legs. "Today was wonderful. Thank you for suggesting it." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," Barrett set aside the rifle. "You deserved a day of happiness." "So did you." Faith studied his face in the golden lamplight. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "What do you want, Barrett? Long term, I mean. You have been here over a month now, and I realize I do not know what your plans are. Are you going to stay in Texas? Are you planning to move on? I know you said you were drifting, but surely you must have some idea of where you want to end up." Barrett was quiet for a long moment, his expression serious. "Honestly, I want to stay here, on this farm, with you." He held up a hand before she could respond. "I know that is probably not what you want to hear. I know you value your independence and you do not want to feel obligated to me. But you asked for honesty, so I'm giving it to you. I want to help you build this place into something strong and lasting. I want to watch Timothy grow into the man I know he can be. And I want to be with you, Faith. Not as a hired hand or a guest, but as a partner. As a man courting the woman he is falling in love with." Faith's breath caught. He had said it, the words they had been dancing around for weeks, and hearing them made something inside her break open, all the fear and resistance crumbling away. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but it is true." Barrett stood and crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "Then stop being terrified. Stop waiting for something bad to happen. Maybe this is it, Faith. Maybe this is the good thing we both deserve after all the loss and pain. Maybe we get to be happy." "Do you really believe that?" She touched his face, feeling the rough texture of his beard against her palm. Do you really think we can have that? I do, if we are brave enough to reach for it. He covered her hand with his, pressing it more firmly against his cheek. I love you, Faith Bradford. I know it is fast and probably crazy, but I do. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn determination. I love the way you take care of everyone around you. I love the way you laugh and the way you look at the world with hope, even when you have every reason to despair. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. Faith felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but they were happy tears for once. I love you too. I think I have loved you since you rode up to my well looking for work. You saved me, Barrett. In every way a person can be saved. He pulled her down to him and kissed her, and Faith felt like she was finally home. His lips were gentle at first, almost hesitant, then deepened as she responded. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and he pulled her close against his chest, surrounding her with his warmth and strength. It was a kiss full of promise and possibility, of all the things they had not yet said, and all the days stretching ahead of them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Barrett rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Faith laughed, the sound bright and joyful. That is not very romantic proposal, Mr. Langley. I will do it properly, he promised, with flowers and a speech and everything you deserve. But I needed to ask. I needed you to know that I am serious about this, about us. Yes, Faith said simply. Yes, I will marry you. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He kissed her again, then stood and pulled her to her feet, spinning her around in a circle that made her laugh and cling to his shoulders. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. We should wait a little while before we tell people, Faith said practically, even as her heart soared. Let the town gossip die down, and I need to make sure Timothy is comfortable with this. Timothy will be thrilled, Barrett said confidently. He has been dropping hints for weeks about how you and I should court properly, but we will do whatever you think is best. I am in no hurry as long as I know you are mine. I am yours, Faith agreed softly, and you are mine. The next few weeks were the happiest Faith could remember in years. She and Barrett continued to work side by side during the day, but now there were stolen moments and secret smiles, brief touches that sent warmth through her entire body. They told Timothy about their engagement, and as Barrett had predicted, her brother was overjoyed, already making plans for the wedding and talking about all the improvements they could make to the farm, with Barrett as a permanent member of the family. Faith's mother had a brief period of lucidity, and Faith told her about Barrett. Her mother smiled and squeezed her hand weakly. Your father would approve, she whispered. He always wanted you to be happy, to be loved well. I am, Mama, Faith assured her, tears streaming down her face. I am so loved. Her mother died 3 days later, slipping away peacefully in her sleep. Faith grieved, but there was peace in it too. Her mother had held on long enough to see her daughter safe and happy, and that felt like a gift. Barrett stood beside her through the funeral, solid and steady, and helped her and Timothy navigate the painful process of saying goodbye. After the funeral, when the last of the neighbors had left and the house was quiet, Faith sat on the porch and let herself cry all the tears she'd been holding back. Barrett sat beside her, not saying anything, just being present. When she finally exhausted herself, she leaned against his broad shoulder and felt his arm come around her. She's with Papa now, Faith said softly. They loved each other so much. In a way, I think she died of a broken heart when we lost him. Some loves are like that, Barrett said quietly. So deep and true that you cannot imagine existing without the other person. That is the kind of love I want with you, Faith, the kind that lasts a lifetime and beyond. We will have it, Faith promised. I feel it already. You are part of me now, Barrett, part of my heart. In September, when the worst of the summer heat had passed and the fall planting was done, they were married in a simple ceremony at the church in Dallas. Faith wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried wildflowers that Barrett had picked himself. Timothy stood up as Barrett's best man, beaming with pride. The pastor's wife and her husband served as witnesses, and a small gathering of friends and neighbors attended. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Barrett kissed her with such tenderness and love that Faith felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They were married. This strong, gentle mountain man was now hers, legally and irrevocably bound to her for the rest of their lives. They celebrated with a simple meal back at the farm, which would now be their home together. As the guests departed and Timothy tactfully made himself scarce, Barrett took Faith's hand and led her into the house. They had not yet shared a bed, both agreeing to wait until they were properly married, and now the anticipation hung thick in the air between them. "Are you nervous?" Barrett asked softly as they stood in the bedroom that would now be theirs. "A little," Faith admitted, "but mostly I am happy. So incredibly happy." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for." "I am ready." Faith reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers only trembling slightly. "I want this. I want you." He helped her with the complicated fastenings of her dress, his big fingers surprisingly nimble. When they finally came together, skin against skin, it was everything Faith had dreamed of and more. Barrett was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and loved through every moment. And when they finally joined together as husband and wife, Faith understood what her mother had meant about love so deep you could not imagine existing without the other person. She and Barrett were two halves of one whole, finally made complete. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, Barrett's strong arms wrapped around her, her head pillowed on his broad chest. Faith traced lazy patterns on his skin, marveling at the solid reality of him, the fact that he was truly hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly, his deep voice rumbling under her ear. "That I am the luckiest woman in the world, that you rode into my life when I needed you most and gave me everything I had lost. Hope, joy, love, a future." "I am the lucky one," Barrett insisted. "I spent 5 years hiding from life, convinced I was better off alone, and then I saw you standing in your yard, fierce and frightened and so beautiful it made my chest hurt, and I knew my hiding days were over. You brought me back to life, Faith. You gave me a reason to be in the world again." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in happiness, and Faith's last thought before drifting off was that she had never felt so safe, so loved, so completely at home. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following months. Barrett proved to be everything Faith could have hoped for in a husband and partner. He worked tirelessly on the farm, making improvements and repairs and always consulting her on decisions rather than assuming authority. He treated Timothy like a brother and a friend, teaching him skills and giving him respect. And he loved Faith with a steady devotion that made her fall deeper in love with him every day. The farm began to thrive under their combined efforts. The cattle Barrett bought with money from his savings produced healthy calves. The crops they planted in the fall came up strong. Neighbors who had been cool after the scandal of Barrett paying off the mortgage warmed up when they saw the obvious love and respect between the couple. By the time winter arrived, the Bradford farm was known as one of the most successful small operations in the area. In January, Faith realized she had missed her monthly courses. Her heart began to race with a mixture of joy and fear. She waited another week to be sure, then told Barrett one evening after supper. He was chopping wood for the stove when she approached him, her hands twisted nervously in her apron. "Barrett, I need to tell you something." He set down the axe immediately, concern crossing his face. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Faith smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. "At least, I hope you will not think so. I am with child. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Barrett just stared at her, and Faith felt a flutter of worry. But then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around before setting her down carefully as if she were made of glass. "We are having a baby," he said wonderingly. "Faith, we are having a baby." "You are happy?" she asked, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy? I am over the moon. I am thrilled. I'm terrified, but in the best possible way." He knelt down and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your papa, and I promise to love you and protect you every day of your life." Faith ran her fingers through his long hair, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "You're going to be an amazing father." "I hope so." He looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I want to give this child everything. Love and safety and a good home. All the things I lost. We will," Faith promised. "Together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Faith continued to work on the farm with Barrett's help, though he insisted she not do anything too strenuous. Timothy was beside himself with excitement at the prospect of becoming an uncle. They spent the long winter evenings making plans and preparing a nursery in one of the spare rooms. In late August of 1877, on a hot afternoon with thunderstorms rolling in from the west, Faith went into labor. Barrett sent Timothy racing for the midwife while he stayed with Faith, holding her hand and talking her through the pain. The midwife arrived just in time to deliver a healthy baby boy with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the world in no uncertain terms. "A son," Barrett breathed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the squirming infant. "We have a son." Faith was exhausted but happier than she had ever been. What should we name him? They had discussed names, but nothing had felt quite right until this moment. Barrett looked at his son, then at Faith. "What about Benjamin? It means son of my right hand, a beloved son." "Benjamin Langley," Faith said softly, testing the name. "I love it. Hello, Benjamin. Welcome to the world, little one." Barrett held his son for the first time, his large hands cradling the tiny body with infinite gentleness, and Faith felt her love for him deepen even further. This was her family, her husband and her son and her brother. This was the life she had never dared to dream of during those dark days when it seemed like everything was falling apart. Thank you," Barrett said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me this. A family, a home, a reason to wake up every morning with joy instead of just going through the motions. You saved my life, Faith, just as surely as I saved your farm." "We saved each other," Faith corrected gently. "That is what love does. It saves us and makes us whole." Benjamin grew into a sturdy, happy child with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's determination. The farm continued to prosper. Timothy grew into a fine young man and eventually courted and married the daughter of a neighboring farmer, building a house on the back section of the Bradford property so he could stay close to his sister and the land he loved. 2 years after Benjamin was born, Faith delivered twin girls, Emma and Sarah, who looked like miniature versions of their mother and kept Barrett wrapped around their tiny fingers from the moment they arrived. The house rang with laughter and love, and Faith sometimes had to pinch herself to believe it was all real. One evening in the spring of 1882, 5 years after their wedding, Faith and Barrett sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The children were playing in the yard, their laughter floating through the warm air. Timothy and his wife were visiting for supper, their own baby daughter asleep in Faith's arms. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Faith asked softly. "If you had not ridden up that day? If you had passed by and kept going?" Barrett wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I try not to think about it. It hurts too much to imagine a world where I did not find you." "I would have lost everything," Faith said quietly. "The farm, my family, my hope. Rutherford would have taken it all. But I did find you," Barrett said firmly. "Whatever force in the universe brought me to your gate that day, I am grateful for it every single moment. You are my heart, Faith. You and these children and this life we have built together. This is everything I never knew I needed." "I love you," Faith said, leaning into his warmth. "More than I have words to express. I love you too, for the rest of my life and beyond." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play and their family gather. And Faith thought about the journey that had brought them here, the grief and fear and desperate struggle, the mountain man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer, the love that had grown between them, unexpected and undeniable, the life they had built together, full of joy and purpose and belonging. She thought about the day Rutherford had driven up in his black carriage, ready to take everything from her. She thought about how hopeless and alone she had felt. And then she thought about Barrett riding up to her well, this stranger who saw her pain and decided to help for no reason except that it was the right thing to do. He had paid her mortgage and put the farm in her name, expecting nothing in return. He had given her security and freedom. But more than that, he had given her his heart, his strength, his unwavering devotion. He had given her a love so deep and true that it anchored her to the world in the best possible way. "What are you thinking about?" Barrett asked, sensing the direction of her thoughts. "About how grateful I am, for everything. For you." Faith smiled up at him. "You saved me, Barrett Langley. In every way, a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he said, echoing her words from years ago. "That is what love does." As the sun set and the stars began to appear, Faith held her niece close and leaned against her husband, surrounded by family and love, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The struggles of the past had led her here, to this perfect moment, and she would not change a single thing about the journey. The mountain man had come down from his solitude and found his home. The desperate woman fighting to save her family's farm had found not just salvation, but a love story for the ages. Together they had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of love and strength that would continue through their children and their children's children. Years later, when they were old and gray and surrounded by grandchildren, Barrett would still hold Faith's hand and tell anyone who would listen about the day he rode up to a small farm outside Dallas and met the woman who would change his life forever. And Faith would smile and add her own version about the mysterious stranger who appeared when she needed him most and loved her with a devotion that never wavered. Their love story became legend in the area, passed down through generations as an example of how goodness and love can triumph over greed and despair. The farm prospered for decades, always keeping the Bradford name that Faith's father had established, always remembering the man who had paid the mortgage and put it in her name without asking for anything in return except the chance to love her. And on quiet evenings when the work was done and the family gathered around the table for supper, Barrett would catch Faith's eye across the room and smile, and she would smile back, both of them remembering that hot July day in 1876 when everything changed. When a mountain man came down from his solitude and a desperate woman took a chance on trusting a stranger. When two lost souls found each other and built a life filled with more love and joy than either had ever imagined possible. That was their story. That was their legacy. And it was more beautiful and meaningful than any fairy tale because it was real, built on sacrifice and trust and a love that grew stronger with every passing year. They had faced hardship and loss, but they had faced it together, and that had made all the difference. In the end, that is what mattered most, not the money or the land or the material successes, though those were blessings. What mattered was the love they shared, the family they built, the life they created together from the ashes of their individual losses. What mattered was that when everything seemed darkest, hope appeared in the form of a stranger on horseback, and two people brave enough to reach for happiness found everything they had ever needed in each other. And they lived, truly lived, every single day for the rest of their long and happy lives, never taking for granted the miracle that had brought them together, always grateful for the love that had saved them both.